Hello, I'm Natalie Haynes, and I am the author of Stone Blind, 1,000 Ships, Pandora's Jar, and now Divine Might, which talks about goddesses in the Greek myth and follows their stories as they were worshipped in the ancient world, stories that were told about them, temples that were built to them, sculptures that were crafted of them, and why these goddesses might have had such a central role in ancient life. And the short answer is loads of reasons, and the slightly longer answer is because they reflected back aspects of the world around you in ancient Greece. So, for example, some of those things are things that seem really normal to us, I think. So it doesn't seem at all unreasonable that there's a goddess, Aphrodite, who is responsible for love and lust and sexual desire. There has always been such a phenomenon, so of course you want a goddess to represent it. And in a way, I kind of think it sort of makes more sense having multiple gods, that you can then obsess about one particular thing without feeling sort of guilty that you're being trivial. You know, if your love life is terrible and you pray to a single god, then, you know, they've got wars they should be dealing with or famines or something. But if you pray to the goddess of love and sex, Aphrodite, then you're just being polite. This is a good idea, because then she won't punish you by making you fall for furniture or something like that. NB, don't try that at home. And so I think the intensity of desire and how it is experienced is something that we now assess differently. So now I think we would suggest that love comes from within, that if I were to see a beautiful, handsome man and fall for him, I might think it was all him being beautiful, but I might equally well think I was really ready to fall in love with somebody. For the Greeks, it's an entirely third-party affair. So Aphrodite afflicts you with a desire, or her son Eros might shoot you with an arrow, and then you experience these feelings of passion whether you wanted to or not. And we can see that happening in ancient sources where Aphrodite will suddenly, you know, walk past and make animals all fall for each other immediately. You know, hooray, we're going to have new tiny bulls, this is all going to be delightful. But you can see that sense when, you know, spring comes and everyone's like, ooh, I'm so interested in it. It's like, well, yeah, why not make it a goddess? It makes perfect sense. The same, I guess, with things like the harvest, that again, you want a goddess you can make sacrifices to, that you can pray to when you're worrying that your crops might not survive, or, you know, when the weather is really bleak and you're afraid, then you need a narrative that might explain that. And that happens with gods and goddesses in ancient Greece. You know, when you have earthquakes, which happen in Greece and indeed in Italy, you need a god who's responsible for that. That would be Poseidon whacking his trident on the ground and making the earth shake. And so you can easily see how these things carry over, I guess. Sometimes there are elements of the world which we're perhaps not quite so close to now. So Artemis, of course, is the goddess of hunting. And we probably spend a bit less time, I hesitate to judge, but probably a bit less time hunting wild animals than the ancient Greeks did. We have quite a different way of living now. But again, it was quite a perilous activity. You do see people, Odysseus has been gored by a boar in his youth. We discover that he can be identified still by the scar decades later in the Odyssey when he returns to Ithaca in disguise, and his old nurse Eurycleia can recognize him. And so I suppose there are elements of normal human life, rites of passage, particularly of female life, that these goddesses often represent. And so perhaps Artemis is the goddess that you would associate with girlhood, and her brother Apollo with boys. So she has young girls as her priestesses, or her sort of mini priestesses, I suppose. When your parents decide that it's time for you to marry, you would perhaps sacrifice your doll, a small clay figurine, at the sanctuary of Artemis to represent that you are putting away childish things, that you're entering into adult life, which would, by the way, have happened at to our eyes, horrifyingly young age. But then that's really helpful, and for the act of giving birth, for example, Artemis, somewhat confusingly, given that she is a chaste goddess herself, and that's chaste T-E, not E-D, she is also a goddess associated with childbirth because she helps her mother produce Apollo, her brother, and her mother feels no pain, so that's how you know she's good at it. So you pray to her when you're giving birth. So you come to Artemis as a child when you want to experience love and be loved in exchange and desired. it's Aphrodite that you need. When you want to give birth safely and not die in the attempt, it's Artemis that you need again. When you want to be happily married, it's Hera, which is really saying something given that she is married to Zeus, easily the worst person in all of Greek myth in terms of his views on consent, domestic assault, and so on. But let's not go down that path too far. And so all these goddesses represent aspects of daily life, I suppose, in addition to their own grand stories and personae in Greek myth. And so you can really see how worshipping them was so integral to the way the ancient Greeks lived.